Death walked through the mahogany doors of Hannock at exactly 9:47 on a Tuesday night. Maya Chun felt it before she saw it. The shift in air pressure. The subtle wrongness that made her grandmother's china rattle in distant memory. 22 months out of the service, and her body still recognized the electric moment before violence erupted. Her hands stilled on the water pitcher as 5 men entered the upscale Korean restaurant. Their movements too coordinated, their eyes scanning not for empty tables, but for exits and threats. The dinner service had been perfect until that moment. Soft jazz threaded through conversations in 3 languages, while Maya moved between tables with a practiced efficiency that came from 2 years of double shifts. The Hannock was her sanctuary of controlled chaos, where she understood the rules and excelled within them. Elderly Korean businessmen discussing deals over galbi. Young couples sharing their first expensive meal together. Families celebrating promotions and anniversaries. And in the corner booth, the man who commanded the room without saying a word. Kang Min-jun had arrived 40 minutes earlier with 2 companions who positioned themselves to watch the entrance. Maya had served him countless times over the past 8 months, noting how other Korean diners showed him subtle deference, how the restaurant owner personally ensured his table was always available, how his presence seemed to make everyone else speak more quietly. He ordered the same meal every Tuesday. Bulgogi, perfectly prepared. Green tea, never coffee. He left generous tips and thanked her in English that carried only the faintest accent. Tonight something was different. He kept checking his phone. His usual calm seemed strained around the edges. Maya had learned to read danger the hard way. 3 tours in Afghanistan had taught her that survival came from noticing what didn't belong. The 5 men who entered now carried that particular stillness that preceded action. Their jackets hung wrong. Their eyes moved with tactical precision. Their positioning cut off the restaurant's primary escape routes. She was already moving when the first man reached inside his coat. Her training kicked in before conscious thought engaged. The water pitcher hit the floor as she dove toward the elderly couple at table 6, her body covering theirs as the first gunshot cracked through the expensive quiet. Screaming erupted. Chairs overturned. The soft jazz continued playing while chaos exploded around its melody. Maya's mind cataloged threats with mechanical precision. 5 attackers, all armed. 2 exit routes, both compromised. Approximately 30 civilians, most panicking. She rolled away from the elderly couple, shouting for them to stay down, her eyes finding Min-jun's corner booth through the madness. His bodyguards were already moving, weapons drawn, but they were outnumbered and caught off guard. One went down immediately. The other took cover behind an overturned table, returning fire while trying to shield his employer. Min-jun himself remained eerily calm, his dark eyes meeting Maya's across the chaos. For a heartbeat that stretched like eternity, she saw something flicker across his face. Recognition, not of her personally, but of what she was, the way she moved, the tactical assessment in her gaze, the controlled stillness that marked someone who had danced with death professionally. More gunfire. Another scream, cut short. The scent of gunpowder mixed with the lingering aroma of grilled meat and jasmine tea. Maya's grandmother needed her alive, needed the health insurance that came with this job, needed the steady income that paid for medications and specialist appointments. The smart thing would be to stay down, stay safe, let whatever was happening play out while she protected the innocent civilians around her. But Maya had never been good at the smart thing when people were dying. She spotted the fallen water pitcher, its metal surface gleaming. 20 feet away, a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. The positioning of the attackers, their focus entirely on Min-jun's corner. The tactical advantage she could create with the right distraction. Min-jun's surviving bodyguard was bleeding, his return fire becoming sporadic. The attackers were closing in, methodical and professional. In 30 seconds, maybe less, they would have a clear shot at their target. Maya Chun made her choice. The same choice she had made in the mountains of Afghanistan when her unit was pinned down and dying. The choice that had earned her medals and nightmares in equal measure. She was going to fight. I would love to hear from you all watching this from different places. Drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from tonight, and whether you have ever been in a situation where you had to make a split-second decision to help someone else, even when it meant putting yourself at risk. Your stories always inspire me. The restaurant had become a war zone, but Maya-chan was finally home. Maya moved like liquid death through the chaos. The metal water pitcher became a weapon in her grip, its weight familiar as any sidearm she had carried through mountain passes and urban warfare. She rolled behind the overturned table where Min Jun's bodyguard bled steadily, his return fire growing weaker with each exchange. The man looked up at her with glazed eyes that tried to focus, tried to understand why a waitress was combat crawling through gunfire. "Get down," he managed in Korean, his voice thick with pain and confusion. Maya ignored him, her attention fixed on the nearest attacker, the one advancing on their position with methodical precision. Close quarters combat, room full of civilians, limited angles of engagement. The tactical assessment ran through her mind like muscle memory as she calculated distance, timing, opportunity. She struck without warning. The attacker never saw her coming. One moment, he was advancing with professional confidence, weapon trained on the corner booth where Min Jun had taken cover. The next, Maya exploded from behind the table like a coiled spring releasing. The water pitcher connected with his wrist in a bone-crushing arc. His scream cut through the gunfire as his weapon clattered across polished hardwood. Maya followed through with devastating efficiency. Elbow to solar plexus, knee to groin as he doubled over. Hand-to-hand techniques drilled into her through months of brutal training until they became instinctive as breathing. The man dropped, gasping and broken. She had his weapon before he hit the ground. The restaurant seemed to freeze for a heartbeat as Maya Chun, 26-year-old waitress with student loans and a sick grandmother, moved with the lethal grace of someone who had killed professionally. Her stance was textbook perfect, her weapon handling smooth as silk. Her eyes scanned for the next threat with cold tactical precision that belonged in special operations units, not dinner service. Min Jun stared at her from his defensive position, his dark eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something deeper. Recognition dawned across his face like sunrise breaking over a battlefield. This was not a civilian who had stumbled into violence. This was a soldier who had come home. 2 down, 3 remaining. Maya processed the tactical situation with the analytical calm that had kept her alive through firefights in Kandahar and Kabul. The remaining attackers had noticed their companions fall, their attention shifting from Min Jun to this unexpected threat. Their formation wavered as they tried to process what they were seeing. She used their confusion. Maya moved with controlled aggression, using overturned tables and panicked civilians as cover while she closed distance on the second target. The man managed to get his weapon up, finger tightening on trigger, but Maya was already inside his guard. She struck with precision born of countless hours of close quarters training. Joint locks and pressure points applied with surgical accuracy. He went down hard and stayed down. The third attacker opened fire, automatic weapon chattering in the enclosed space. Maya rolled, came up behind the bar, glass exploding around her as bottles of expensive liquor shattered under the barrage. The scent of alcohol mixed with gunpowder and fear while she calculated angles and distances. Min Jun's remaining bodyguard struggled to reload with blood-slick fingers, trying to provide covering fire. Maya caught his eye, gestured toward the kitchen entrance, coordinated their assault with nothing more than hand signals that he somehow understood despite his confusion. They moved as a team. The bodyguard provided suppressing fire while Maya flanked wide, using her knowledge of the restaurant layout to approach from an unexpected angle. The remaining attackers were professional, but not prepared for military-level tactical coordination from a waitress and a wounded bodyguard. Maya ended it with 2 precise shots. The silence that followed felt overwhelming after the explosive violence. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer with each heartbeat. Maya stood among the wreckage, weapons still ready, her breathing controlled despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Her uniform was torn and blood-stained, but she remained upright, alert, scanning for additional threats that might emerge. Minjun rose slowly from his defensive position, his gaze never leaving Maya's face. She watched him process what he had witnessed, saw the exact moment when understanding crystallized in his intelligent eyes. She was not who she appeared to be, had never been who she appeared to be. "We need to leave," he said, his voice carrying quiet authority even in the aftermath of violence. "Police will complicate things." Maya hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Going with him meant abandoning her carefully constructed ordinary life. Staying meant explaining to police how a restaurant waitress had neutralized 5 armed professionals with military efficiency. Neither option offered safety, but one offered answers to questions she had not known she needed to ask. The sirens were very close now. Minjun extended his hand toward her, his dark eyes holding promises and threats in equal measure. His presence filled the destroyed restaurant, power and control radiating from him like heat from a forge. Maya realized with crystalline clarity that her intervention had not simply saved his life. It had changed everything between them. She took his hand. They moved through the restaurant's rear exit with practiced stealth, Minjun leading her through service corridors she had not known existed. His knowledge of the building's layout suggested this had been planned long before tonight's violence. Maya filed the information away while following his lead toward whatever came next. The armored sedan waited in the alley, engine running, driver ready. Maya slid into leather seats that smelled of expensive cologne and quiet power, while Minjun settled beside her. The vehicle pulled away from the chaos with smooth efficiency, leaving behind her old life like shed skin. Through tinted windows, Maya watched emergency vehicles converge on the Hannock. Red and blue lights painted the night in colors that reminded her of other battles, other choices that had changed everything. Minjun studied her with the intense focus he brought to important decisions. "Who are you?" he asked quietly, the question carrying weight beyond simple curiosity. Maya met his gaze steadily. Until tonight, she had been nobody special. A former soldier trying to build something normal from the pieces of what came after war. Now, sitting in his armored sanctuary while police investigated the violence they had left behind, she realized normal had never been an option. The answer hung between them like a loaded weapon, dangerous and necessary and impossible to ignore. "Someone who just saved your life," Maya replied, her voice steady despite everything that had changed in the space of 15 minutes. Minjun's smile was sharp as a blade and twice as beautiful. "Yes," he agreed, his tone carrying implications that made her pulse quicken despite the adrenaline still flooding her system. "You did." The safe house existed in a world between worlds, tucked into the hills above the city, where money bought privacy and silence came as standard amenity. Maya sat on the edge of a leather sofa that probably cost more than she earned in 6 months, watching Minjun clean the shallow cut on her forearm with surprising gentleness. His hands were steady and sure as he applied antiseptic, his touch clinical yet intimate in a way that made her acutely aware of every point of contact between them. "You are favoring your left shoulder," he observed without looking up from his work. "Old injury." Maya stiffened. She had thought her compensation was subtle, invisible to casual observation. The fact that he had noticed meant he was watching her more carefully than she had realized. Watching her the way she watched others, with tactical assessment disguised as casual interest. "Kandahar province," she said after a moment, testing how much truth she was willing to share. "IED took out our convoy. I got lucky." Minjun's hands paused in their work. His dark eyes met hers, holding a knowledge that surprised her with its depth. "War leaves marks," he said quietly, his accent making the words sound like poetry despite their harsh meaning. Some visible, some not. The antiseptic burned, but Maya did not flinch. She had endured worse pain in worse places with less gentle hands tending her wounds. What surprised her was the care Minjun took, the way he sealed the bandage with precise attention to detail that spoke of experience with battlefield medicine. "You have done this before," she said. "Many times." His voice carried shadows of stories he would not tell, at least not tonight. In my world, violence is occupational hazard. Learning to treat its consequences becomes necessity. Maya studied his face as he worked, noting the faint scars along his jawline, the way his hands moved with practiced efficiency. Kang Minjun was not merely dangerous by association or reputation. He had walked through fire personally, repeatedly, and emerged with the kind of controlled stillness that only came from surviving when others had not. The revelation should have warned her away. Instead, it explained the recognition she had seen in his eyes during the restaurant attack. He knew what she was because he was something similar. Different battlefield, different war, but the same fundamental understanding of what it meant to stand between life and death and make choices that would haunt you forever. Tonight was not random, he said as he finished with her bandage. The timing, the coordination, the fact that they knew exactly where to find me. Someone inside my organization provided information. Maya absorbed this with the analytical calm that had served her well in hostile territory. Inside job meant the threat was ongoing, meant whoever had orchestrated tonight's attack would try again when they realized it had failed. It also meant Minjun could not trust his usual security protocols or personnel. How many people knew you would be at the restaurant tonight? She asked. 5, maybe 6. Minjun's jaw tightened with controlled anger that made him somehow more attractive despite her better judgment. All people I trusted with my life. One of them sold you out. Yes. The single word carried weight like a gravestone dropping into place. And until I identify which one, I am vulnerable to further attacks. Maya understood tactical situations, understood the mathematics of trust and betrayal in hostile environments. What she did not understand was why this concerned her beyond basic human decency. Minjun's problems were not her problems. His war was not her war, except that she had made it her war the moment she chose to fight instead of hide. I need someone I can trust absolutely, Minjun continued, his gaze holding hers with intensity that made her pulse quicken despite her determination to remain detached. Someone with skills that complement rather than replace my existing security. Someone who exists outside my organization and therefore cannot be compromised by the same betrayal. Maya felt the shape of his proposition before he voiced it, recognized the tactical logic, even as every instinct warned her against deeper involvement. You want to hire me? I want you to work for me? Yes. As my personal security specialist, while I investigate and eliminate the source of tonight's betrayal. The offer hung between them like a loaded weapon, dangerous and tempting and impossible to ignore. Maya's practical mind immediately calculated the benefits. Steady income far exceeding what she earned serving dinner to people who did not see her as fully human. Health insurance that would cover her grandmother's escalating medical needs. Professional purpose that utilized skills she had thought she would never need again. The costs were harder to quantify, but no less real. Association with organized crime would end her chances of ever returning to legitimate work. The violence that surrounded Minjun would inevitably touch her again, possibly kill her. And beneath those practical considerations lay a deeper danger she was only beginning to recognize. Kang Minjun was magnetic in ways that had nothing to do with his obvious wealth or power. The way he moved with predatory grace. The way he commanded attention without demanding it. The way he had tended her wounds with hands that could probably kill with equal skill. Maya found herself drawn to him in ways that had nothing to do with tactical necessity and everything to do with the part of herself she had tried to bury when she left the service. I do not work for criminals, she said, testing his reaction. Minjun smiled, the expression transforming his austere features into something beautiful and dangerous. Define criminal. I run businesses that exist in legal gray areas. Yes. I protect territory and people who cannot protect themselves through official channels. I enforce contracts that courts would not recognize. But I do not harm innocents. I do not traffic in human misery. I follow a code that perhaps differs from yours, but is no less binding. His explanation carried conviction that surprised her. Maya had expected deflection or justification, not this calm acceptance of moral complexity. It forced her to examine her own assumptions about right and wrong, good and evil, the choices that defined who people became in circumstances where official justice could not reach. Your grandmother, Minjun said after a moment, his tone shifting to something gentler, needs surgery that insurance will not fully cover. Experimental treatment that offers hope but requires financial resources you do not possess. Maya's blood went cold. The fact that he knew about her grandmother's condition meant he had investigated her thoroughly, possibly before tonight's events. It meant her privacy had been compromised in ways she had not realized. It also meant he understood exactly what leverage would motivate her when appeals to justice or adventure failed. "How do you know about that?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral despite the anger building beneath her calm exterior. "I make it my business to know about people who interest me. And you, Maya Chun, have interested me for longer than you realize." The admission sparked something electric in the space between them. Attraction and threat intertwined in ways that made her hyper-aware of his proximity, his scent of sandalwood and subtle cologne, the way he watched her face as if memorizing details he planned to revisit. "I'm offering you employment, not ownership," he continued. "You would work for me, but not belong to me. The distinction matters. What are the terms?" 50,000 immediately to cover your grandmother's surgery and ongoing care. Additional compensation of 10,000 monthly plus health insurance and housing allowance. Complete autonomy in how you approach security protocols. No involvement in business activities beyond personal protection. The numbers hit Maya like physical blows. 50,000 would save her grandmother's life and provide security she had thought impossible on a waitress salary. 10,000 monthly would allow her to rebuild her life on foundations solid enough to support whatever came next. It was too good to be true, which meant there were costs he had not yet disclosed. "What happens when you find your traitor?" she asked. "Then you decide whether to continue working for me or return to whatever life you choose to build. And if I refuse your offer now, then you return to your apartment and your restaurant job, and I respect your decision completely. But your grandmother does not receive the surgery she needs, and we both know how that story ends." The choice was no choice at all, and they both knew it. Maya's grandmother had raised her after her parents died in a car accident, had sacrificed everything to give Maya opportunities she had never possessed herself. Letting her die for the sake of moral purity was not honor. It was selfishness disguised as principle. "I have conditions," Maya said. Minjun waited with the patience of a predator confident in its eventual success. "I do not hurt innocent people. I do not participate in activities that harm children or exploit the vulnerable. And I maintain the right to leave if your methods become incompatible with my conscience." "Agreed." His response came without hesitation, as if her conditions were reasonable rather than potentially limiting to his operations. "I also want to review your security protocols and make recommendations for improvement. What happened tonight cannot happen again." Minjun's smile returned, sharp and appreciative. "That is exactly why I need someone like you. My current security thinks in terms of intimidation and reaction. You think in terms of prevention and tactical superiority." Maya realized she was going to accept his offer, had probably decided the moment he mentioned her grandmother's condition. The recognition should have felt like defeat, but instead carried something closer to relief. She had been drifting since leaving the service, trying to build a normal life from skills and experiences that were anything but normal. Perhaps it was time to stop fighting her nature and start using it purposefully again. "Show me where I will be working," she said. Minjun stood and extended his hand toward her, the gesture somehow both polite invitation and claim of possession. His compound lay spread before them through floor-to-ceiling windows, a fortress of glass and steel that commanded the hills like a feudal stronghold transplanted to modern California. Maya took his hand and let him lead her toward her new life, toward whatever came next in a world where violence wore expensive suits and honor followed rules she was only beginning to understand. The compound glittered below them like a promise wrapped in threat, beautiful and dangerous, and utterly beyond anything she had imagined when she woke up that morning to serve breakfast to people who never really saw her. Now, someone saw her completely, and that recognition changed everything. Maya spent her first week dismantling Minjun's security like a surgeon dissecting a corpse, methodical and thorough, and utterly devastating in her assessment. She found 17 critical vulnerabilities in the compound's defenses, blind spots in camera coverage, predictable patrol patterns, staff access points that could be compromised with minimal effort, the roof garden that provided excellent sniper positions for anyone with basic climbing skills, emergency protocols that had been written by someone who had never actually lived through an emergency. Minjun watched her work with fascination that bordered on admiration, following her through his own fortress as she pointed out flaws that his expensive security consultants had somehow missed. His staff grew accustomed to the sight of their employer trailing after a black woman in tactical clothing who treated their impenetrable stronghold like a puzzle she was solving for her own entertainment. "Your perimeter is theatrical rather than functional," Maya explained on the third day, standing in his office while surveillance footage played across multiple screens. "You have invested in intimidation over actual protection. The gates look impressive, but could be breached by anyone with basic demolitions knowledge. The guard posts are visible from half a mile away, which means potential attackers can calculate response times and plan accordingly." Minjun listened with the focused attention he brought to important business negotiations, occasionally asking questions that revealed how seriously he took her analysis. "What would you recommend?" Maya pulled up architectural blueprints on his tablet, her fingers moving with confident precision across the screen. "Randomized patrol schedules. Additional sensor arrays here and here. Motion-activated lighting systems that do not telegraph your security measures to observers. Most importantly, you need protocols for situations where your inner circle is compromised. Like now. Exactly like now." They worked together through long days and longer nights, Maya redesigning his defenses while Minjun provided insight into threats she had not considered. Rival organizations, government officials who could be bought or pressured, business associates who smiled while planning betrayal. The complexity of his world amazed her, the delicate balance of power and fear and mutual benefit that kept his empire functioning. It was during these planning sessions that Maya began to see past his carefully controlled exterior, catching glimpses of the man beneath the armor he wore like expensive suits. The way he remembered details about every staff member's family. His quiet donations to charities that helped immigrant communities navigate legal complexities. The old-fashioned courtesy he showed to Mrs. Park, the elderly Korean woman who had managed his household for 20 years. Mrs. Park took to Maya immediately with the enthusiasm of someone who had been waiting years for another woman to invade her male-dominated domain. She appeared in doorways with tea and commentary, her English deliberately broken when she wanted to avoid topics Minjun would disapprove of, perfectly fluent when she felt like lecturing him about working too hard or eating too little. "This one is different," Mrs. Park announced on Maya's 5th day, setting down a tray of traditional sweets with proprietorial satisfaction. "She does not look at you like you are prized to be one." Maya nearly choked on her tea, while Minjun maintained his usual composure, though she caught the slight tightening around his eyes that suggested embarrassment. "Mrs. Park," he said with gentle warning, "Maya is here for security consultation, not your matchmaking schemes." The elderly woman snorted with magnificent disdain. "Security consultation," she repeated, her tone making it clear what she thought of that explanation. "Man who needs bodyguards should learn to cook for himself instead of ordering takeout like teenager." That evening, to Maya's surprise, she found Minjun in the kitchen preparing what appeared to be an elaborate Korean meal. He moved with the same precision he brought to business negotiations, chopping vegetables with knife work that would impress professional chefs. The domesticity was jarring. This powerful man in his pristine kitchen wearing an apron over his expensive shirt. "Mrs. Park has been threatening to quit if I do not demonstrate basic life skills," he explained without looking up from his preparation. "She believes my reliance on restaurant food reflects poorly on my upbringing." Maya leaned against the counter, watching his hands work with economical grace. The scent of garlic and sesame oil filled the air, warm and welcoming in a way that transformed the sterile perfection of his home into something more human. Your mother taught you to cook. My grandmother. Minjun's voice carried careful neutrality, but Maya caught the subtle shift in his posture. After my father was killed, she insisted I learn to take care of myself in all ways, not just business. Self-reliance was survival in her world. The admission hung between them, the first personal information he had offered without prompting. Maya understood the significance, understood that Minjun did not share family history casually. She also understood that his father's death had been more than natural causes, understood that the violence surrounding his life had roots deeper than business rivalries. How old were you? She asked. 14. He set down his knife and turned to face her, his dark eyes holding shadows that made her chest tighten with unexpected sympathy. Old enough to understand what it meant, too young to prevent it. Maya felt something shift between them, a recognition that went beyond professional respect or physical attraction. They were both products of violence that had shaped them in childhood, both people who had learned to survive by becoming weapons themselves. The difference was that she had chosen her battles while his had been chosen for him. The timer chimed, interrupting the moment with domestic normalcy. Minjun served dinner with the same attention to detail he applied to everything else, presenting each dish with explanations of ingredients and preparation that revealed how much care he had taken with the meal. They ate in comfortable silence, punctuated by Maya's genuine appreciation for food that surpassed anything served in the restaurant she knew. Minjun watched her reactions with satisfaction that seemed disproportionate to the simple act of sharing a meal, as if her enjoyment validated something important to him. It was the most normal evening Maya had experienced since accepting his employment, and perhaps that normalcy made what came next feel like such a betrayal. The surveillance breakthrough came at midnight when facial recognition software finally identified the man who had been asking questions about Minjun's schedule at 3 different locations over the past month. Jiangsu Park, Minjun's lieutenant for 7 years, trusted advisor, someone who had eaten at this same table countless times. Maya watched Minjun process the evidence with controlled fury that made the air around him seem to vibrate with suppressed violence. His face remained expressionless, but his hands clenched into fists that spoke of barely contained rage. I will kill him tonight, Minjun said with quiet certainty that chilled Maya more than any shouting could have. Personal betrayal demands personal response. Maya recognized the dangerous calm in his voice, the same tone she had heard in soldiers who had passed beyond anger into something colder and more final. She also recognized that his instinctive response was tactically foolish, driven by emotion rather than strategic thinking. That would be a mistake, she said carefully. Minjun turned to her with eyes that had gone flat and dark, the warmth from dinner completely erased. You question my judgment. I question your tactics. There's a difference. He stood from his chair with fluid grace that reminded her exactly how dangerous he could be when crossed. Jiangsu betrayed me. Sold information that nearly cost my life and definitely cost the lives of my men. Honor demands immediate response. Honor demands effective response, Maya countered, rising to face him across the table. Killing him tonight tells his conspirators that their betrayal has been discovered without revealing how much you know about their operation. You lose the opportunity to feed them false information, to identify other traitors, to turn the situation to your advantage. Minjun's jaw tightened with controlled anger that made her acutely aware of the power differential between them. She was arguing with a man who commanded absolute authority within his organization, who was accustomed to unquestioning obedience from everyone around him. You forget your place, he said, his voice carrying warning that would have silenced anyone familiar with his reputation. Maya felt something ignite in her chest. A fury that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with professional pride. My place is to keep you alive, which means preventing you from making decisions based on wounded ego rather than tactical advantage. The words hung between them like a challenge thrown down in ancient arenas, impossible to ignore or forgive. Minjun moved around the table with predatory slowness, his presence filling the space between them until Maya could smell his cologne, could see the pulse beating at his throat. You think you understand my world because you have read reports and analyzed security footage, he said, his voice low and dangerous. But you know nothing about loyalty, about honor, about the consequences of allowing betrayal to go unpunished. Maya stood her ground despite every instinct screaming at her to retreat, to apologize, to remember that she was employee rather than equal. I know about tactical planning and strategic thinking, which is what you hired me for. If you want someone to validate your emotional responses, hire a therapist, not a security consultant. The silence that followed felt explosive with potential violence. Minjun stared at her with an intensity that made her hyper-aware of every breath, every heartbeat, every inch of space between them. Maya realized she had pushed too far, had challenged his authority in ways that might be unforgivable in his world. Then his expression shifted into something she had not expected. Respect mixed with frustration, mixed with something deeper and more dangerous. "You are right," he said finally, the admission seeming to surprise him as much as it surprised her. "My reaction is emotional rather than strategic. But Jiangsu was like a brother to me. His betrayal feels like losing family again." The vulnerability in his voice hit Maya harder than his anger had, revealing the man beneath the armor of absolute control. She understood suddenly that his fury was not just about tactical betrayal, but about personal loss, about trusting someone who had sold that trust for money or power or whatever motivation drove people to destroy what they claimed to value. "I understand," she said more gently, "but using him is better than killing him. At least until we know everything he knows." Minjun nodded slowly, his business mind reasserting control over his wounded heart. "You are suggesting we feed him false information and observe who receives it." "Exactly. Turn the betrayal into a weapon against his conspirators." They were standing very close now, close enough that Maya could see the conflict playing out in his dark eyes, could feel the tension radiating from his controlled stillness. The argument had stripped away their professional distance, leaving something raw and honest, and far more dangerous than physical attraction. "You challenge me," he said, his voice carrying wonder along with the accusation. "Someone should." Minjun reached toward her face with careful deliberation, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with gentleness that contrasted sharply with the power she knew those hands possessed. Maya felt herself lean into the touch despite every rational thought warning her against complication, against mixing professional duty with personal desire. The kiss that began to form between them carried the weight of everything unspoken, every moment of tension and recognition and carefully suppressed attraction that had been building since the night she saved his life. The emergency alarm that shattered the moment felt like betrayal twice over, harsh and demanding and impossible to ignore. Minjun stepped back with visible effort, his professional mask sliding back into place while he reached for the secure phone that had begun buzzing insistently. The conversation was brief and conducted in rapid Korean that Maya could not follow, but she read the tension in his posture, the way his free hand clenched and released in controlled rhythm. When he ended the call, his expression had shifted back into the cold calculation she associated with business emergencies. "Motion sensors detected intrusion at the perimeter," he said. 3 vehicles, at least 12 individuals, approaching from the north access road. Maya felt her training engage like a switch thrown, personal feelings subsumed beneath tactical necessity. The almost kiss became irrelevant compared to immediate threats and defensive positioning. "How long until they reach the compound?" she asked. 15 minutes, maybe 20 if they approach cautiously. Maya was already moving toward the security station, her mind calculating fields of fire and defensive positions. The conversation about Jiangsu would have to wait. The moment between them would have to wait. Everything would have to wait except the fundamental job of keeping Minjun alive through whatever came next. But as she began implementing emergency protocols, Maya realized that something had changed between them tonight, something that would not disappear when the current crisis ended. The carefully maintained professional distance had been breached, possibly irreparably. She had challenged his authority, and he had accepted the challenge rather than crushing it. They had almost kissed and been interrupted by violence that reminded them both why emotional complications were dangerous in their world. Maya-chan was no longer just an employee hired for her tactical skills. She had become something more complex and far more dangerous to both of them. The recognition would have to be dealt with eventually, but first they had to survive the next 20 minutes. The call came at 6 in the morning while Maya was reviewing perimeter security footage, her third cup of coffee growing cold beside surveillance monitors that had shown nothing but empty approaches since the false alarm 3 days earlier. Jong-soo's voice carried the careful neutrality of a man walking a tightrope between loyalty and betrayal when he reported that Maya's grandmother had been admitted to Presbyterian Hospital with complications from her condition. Routine procedure, he assured Min-jun during the brief conversation. Nothing that required immediate attention. Maya felt ice crystallize in her veins as she processed the implications. Her grandmother's surgery was scheduled for next week at Cedars-Sinai, not Presbyterian. The medical team had been selected months ago after extensive consultations. There was no reason for her to be at a different hospital unless someone had orchestrated the transfer. Someone who knew exactly how to make Maya-chan vulnerable. Min-jun ended the call and met her eyes across the security station, his expression grim with understanding that matched her own. Jong-soo had just revealed himself completely while setting a trap that exploited the one weakness Maya could not defend against. "It is obvious bait," Min-jun said, his voice carrying controlled fury that made the air around him seem to vibrate with suppressed violence. Yes, Maya was already reaching for her tactical gear, her mind shifting into operational mode despite the fear clawing at her chest. "But she is still my grandmother, and they still have her." Min-jun moved to block her path to the door, his presence filling the space between Maya and immediate action. "You cannot go alone. This is designed to separate us, to remove you from my protection while positioning you where they can take you as leverage. I know the tactical situation." Maya's voice carried steel that matched the expression in her eyes. "But I will not abandon her to make a point about strategic thinking. Then we go together." The drive to Presbyterian Hospital felt like entering hostile territory, which Maya realized it probably was. Min-jun's security detail followed in 2 additional vehicles, their presence both reassuring and inflammatory. Arriving with obvious protection would announce their awareness of the trap, while potentially escalating whatever confrontation awaited them. Maya had convinced Min-jun to keep his men outside while she entered the hospital alone, promising to maintain radio contact and extract immediately if the situation deteriorated. The compromise satisfied neither of them, but acknowledged the reality that her grandmother's safety depended on appearing to cooperate with whatever had been orchestrated. The elderly Korean woman in the hospital bed looked so small and fragile that Maya felt her tactical discipline waver for the first time in years. Machines monitored vital signs that seemed stable despite the circumstances, but her grandmother's confusion was obvious even through the sedation that kept her quiet. "They said you would come," said the man who emerged from the bathroom, where he had been waiting with professional patience. Jong-soo Park looked exactly as Maya had expected from surveillance footage, unremarkable in the way that made men dangerous in her experience. Pleasant face, expensive suit, eyes that revealed nothing about the calculations happening behind them. "Where are the others?" Maya asked, her hand resting casually near the weapon concealed beneath her jacket. "Close." Jong-soo's smile carried regret that might have been genuine if Maya had been inclined toward charitable interpretation. "I hoped it would not come to this, but Min-jun left me no choice when he brought you into his organization." Maya processed this with the analytical calm that had served her through hostile interrogations and active combat zones. Jong-soo's betrayal was personal rather than purely mercenary, motivated by jealousy or wounded pride rather than simple financial gain. "You feel replaced?" she said. "I am being replaced." His composure slipped enough to reveal genuine anger beneath the professional courtesy. 7 years of loyalty, of service, of building his empire alongside him. Then you appear, and suddenly my advice means nothing. My experience counts for nothing. My position becomes expendable. Maya understood the psychology, even as she calculated angles and exit strategies. Jiangsu saw her as a threat to his relationship with Minjun rather than simply a security consultant, which made him more dangerous because his motivation was emotional rather than rational. The attack came without further warning. 2 men emerged from the stairwell, while a third appeared in the doorway behind Jiangsu, their coordination suggesting extensive planning and preparation. Maya moved immediately, her training engaging faster than conscious thought as she placed herself between the attackers and her grandmother's bed. The first man went down hard when Maya's elbow connected with his solar plexus, but the second had positioned himself to take advantage of her defensive posture. She could neutralize him, but not without leaving her grandmother exposed to the third attacker, or to Jiangsu himself. The tactical mathematics were brutally simple. 3 against 1 in a confined space with a vulnerable civilian to protect. Maya could probably win the fight, but not without risking everything she was fighting to save. Jiangsu understood her position with the same tactical awareness that had made him useful to Minjun for 7 years. "Stand down," he said with quiet authority, "or your grandmother pays for your resistance." Maya raised her hands in apparent surrender while her mind continued calculating possibilities, looking for angles that might shift the tactical balance in her favor. The radio at her belt remained silent, which meant Minjun's security team had not detected the intrusion or had been neutralized before they could respond. They moved through the hospital with professional efficiency, Jiangsu's team having obviously planned multiple evacuation routes and contingencies. Maya memorized everything she could while maintaining the appearance of compliance, noting security camera positions and potential weapons and the subtle signs that revealed which staff members were legitimate hospital employees versus additional conspirators. The realization hit her as they reached the loading dock where a medical transport van waited with engine running. This was not a simple kidnapping or leverage play. The medical equipment visible through the van's rear doors suggested they intended to keep her grandmother alive during whatever came next, which meant the operation was designed for extended duration rather than immediate resolution. Maya felt something cold and final settle in her chest as Jiangsu helped her grandmother onto the transport stretcher. They were not planning to release either of them regardless of what demands they made or what concessions Minjun offered. This was elimination disguised as negotiation, designed to remove both Maya and her grandmother as factors in whatever larger game Jiangsu was playing. The knowledge freed her from any illusion that cooperation would ensure her grandmother's safety, which meant she could focus entirely on survival and eventual rescue rather than managing competing priorities. The van pulled away from the hospital while Maya committed route information to memory and began planning for whatever opportunity might present itself during transport or at whatever destination awaited them. Jiangsu watched her with the careful attention of someone who recognized potential danger despite appearances of helplessness. "Minjun will pay whatever you demand," Maya said, testing his intentions. Jiangsu's smile carried no warmth or satisfaction. "This is not about money. This is about demonstrating that his judgment has been compromised by emotional attachment, that his leadership has become weakness that endangers the entire organization." Maya understood then that she had been targeted not for what she could do, but for what she represented to Minjun, for the way his protective instincts toward her reveal vulnerability that his enemies could exploit. Jiangsu was not trying to steal money or territory. He was trying to steal power by proving that Minjun could no longer be trusted to put business before personal feeling. The warehouse where they stopped felt familiar in a way that all tactical situations became familiar once Maya shifted into operational thinking. Concrete floors that would echo footsteps. High windows that provided potential sniper positions. Multiple entrances and exits that could be controlled or exploited depending on who held them. Jiangsu's operation was professional but not military, which gave Maya advantages she intended to exploit when the opportunity presented itself. His men were experienced with intimidation and simple violence, but not prepared for sustained tactical engagement against someone with her training and experience. Maya settled in to wait while her grandmother slept under medical supervision that seemed genuinely competent despite the circumstances. Jiangsu had made one critical error in his planning. He assumed that taking hostages would make Minjun desperate and careless rather than cold and methodical. The man clearly had never seen what Kong Minjun looked like when someone threatened what belonged to him. Maya did not have to wait long to find out. The assault began at sunset with explosions that shook the warehouse foundation and sent Jiangsu's men scrambling for defensive positions they had not properly prepared. Maya recognized the tactical signature immediately. Military-grade precision combined with criminal ruthlessness, overwhelming force applied with surgical accuracy to specific structural points. Minjun had brought war to Jiangsu's doorstep. Maya moved during the confusion, using her knowledge of the warehouse layout to position herself between her grandmother and the anticipated lines of fire. The medical equipment continued monitoring vital signs while automatic weapons chattered in the distance and smoke began filtering through the warehouse ventilation system. Jiangsu appeared beside her with a pistol in his hand and desperation replacing his earlier composure. He had clearly not anticipated the speed and scale of Minjun's response, had not calculated the resources that would be brought to bear when someone threatened what Minjun considered his own. "This is your fault," Jiangsu said, his voice tight with stress and approaching panic. He would never have risked this kind of exposure for anyone else. Maya met his gaze steadily despite the weapon pointed at her chest. "That tells you everything you need to know about why you were never irreplaceable." The observation hit its target with precision that made Jiangsu's finger tighten on the trigger, but the shot never came. Minjun appeared in the doorway like vengeance given form, his presence filling the space with controlled violence that made the air itself feel dangerous. "Step away from them," he commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority despite speaking barely above a whisper. Jiangsu swung his weapon toward Minjun with movements made clumsy by adrenaline and fear, but Maya was already moving, her training engaging to neutralize the immediate threat to the man she realized she would die to protect. The struggle was brief and decisive, ending with Jiangsu unconscious on the concrete floor and his weapon secured. Minjun reached her in 3 swift strides, his hands moving over her face and arms with desperate gentleness that searched for injuries while his eyes remained alert for additional threats. Maya felt herself lean into his touch, felt the terror she had been suppressing finally find expression through the trembling she could no longer control. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion he was no longer trying to hide. "No, but my grandmother needs proper medical attention immediately." Minjun nodded and spoke rapid Korean into his radio, coordinating evacuation and medical transport with the efficiency of someone accustomed to managing complex operations under extreme stress. Maya watched him work and realized with crystalline clarity that she was witnessing something most people never saw. Minjun unleashed, all pretense of civilized restraint abandoned in favor of absolute protection for what he valued. It should have terrified her. Instead, Maya felt safer than she had since childhood, surrounded by the kind of decisive competence that left no doubt about outcomes or priorities. The medical helicopter arrived within minutes, testimony to resources and preparation that spoke of contingencies planned long before tonight's crisis. Maya rode with her grandmother, while Minjun coordinated the cleanup that would erase evidence of what had happened in ways that satisfied both criminal necessity and legal requirement. Jiangsu would not be seen again, Maya realized. Not by police or rival organizations, or anyone else who might ask uncomfortable questions about loyalty and betrayal, and the consequences of threatening what Minjun protected. The knowledge should have disturbed her. But Maya found herself feeling only satisfaction that justice had been swift and final and perfectly proportioned to the crime. During the helicopter flight to the hospital where her grandmother would receive proper care, Maya understood that something fundamental had changed in her relationship with Kong Minjun. She had seen him at his most dangerous and felt no fear, only gratitude for power wielded in her defense. The careful professional distance she had maintained was gone, burned away by crisis that had revealed what they meant to each other beyond any contract or employment arrangement. Maya Chen was no longer just working for Minjun. She was choosing him, with full knowledge of what that choice meant in his world and what it would cost in her old one. The recognition felt like coming home to a country she had never known existed, but had been searching for all her life. Recovery tasted like green tea and felt like silence broken only by the soft beeping of medical monitors that confirmed her grandmother was alive, stable, and finally receiving the care she needed. Maya sat beside the hospital bed in the private suite Minjun had arranged, watching dawn break over the city through windows that offered views money could buy and security could protect. 48 hours since the warehouse. 18 hours since the surgery that had gone perfectly because the best cardiac specialists in the country had been assembled regardless of cost or convenience. Her grandmother slept peacefully under sedation that would ease her through the initial recovery, her breathing steady and strong in ways it had not been for months. The experimental treatment was already showing positive results according to doctors who spoke in careful optimism and statistical improvements that translated to hope. Minjun entered the room with the quiet consideration he brought to sacred spaces, carrying coffee that smelled expensive and food that Mrs. Park had insisted Maya needed, despite her protest that she was not hungry. He moved with the controlled grace that had become familiar, but Maya noticed the subtle tension around his eyes that spoke of decisions weighing on him. Jiangsu is gone, he said simply, settling into the chair beside hers. The betrayal ends with him. Maya absorbed this confirmation of what she had already known would have been inevitable from the moment Jiangsu chose to threaten her family. In Minjun's world, some crimes carried only one possible punishment, and betrayal that endangered innocence was among them. Your contract is fulfilled, Minjun continued, his voice carefully neutral despite the weight she sensed behind the words. The threat has been eliminated. Your grandmother has the care she needs. You are free to return to whatever life you choose to build. The formal language felt wrong between them after everything they had shared, everything they had survived together. Maya realized he was giving her an official exit, creating space for her to leave without obligation or awkward negotiation about continued employment. The offer of freedom should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like loss. What if I do not want to return to my old life? Maya asked, testing the shape of possibilities she had not allowed herself to consider fully until this moment. Minjun's composure cracked enough to reveal hope mixed with uncertainty, vulnerability that he rarely showed even in their most private moments. What would you want instead? Maya looked at her grandmother's peaceful face, then at the man who had moved heaven and earth to ensure this outcome was possible. She thought about the restaurant where she had served food to people who never really saw her, about the apartment where she had counted pennies and worried about bills she could never pay on her own. Then she thought about the way Minjun looked at her as if she were the most important person in any room. The way he listened to her tactical assessments with respect that valued her expertise over his ego. The way he had unleashed war itself when someone threatened what belonged to him. I want to stay, she said. Not as an employee, as a partner. Minjun went very still in the way that preceded his most important decisions, his dark eyes searching her face as if memorizing details he might never see again. You understand what that means in my world. The dangers, the moral complexities, the fact that some people will always see you as weakness they can exploit rather than strength I depend on. Maya met his gaze steadily, her voice carrying conviction built on weeks of seeing his world from the inside. I understand that you need someone who can watch your back while you watch everyone else's. I understand that your enemies will try to use me against you, which means I need to be stronger than they expect. I understand that choosing you means choosing a life most people would not recognize as normal. She paused, letting the weight of those acknowledgments settle between them before continuing. I also understand that you see me as I actually am rather than who other people think I should be. That you trust my judgment even when it conflicts with your instincts. That you would burn down the world to protect what you love. And somehow, I have become part of what you love. Minjun reached for her hands with movements that trembled slightly despite his usual control. Maya-chun, he said, her name carrying reverence that made her chest tighten with emotion. I have built my life around never needing anything I could not afford to lose. Power, money, respect, even loyalty, all of it can be replaced or rebuilt if circumstances require. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing kisses to her knuckles that felt like promises being sealed. But you have become necessary to me in ways that terrify me, because they make me vulnerable in ways I swore I would never be again after my father died. The admission hung between them like a bridge spanning everything that had brought them to this moment. Violence and attraction, trust and betrayal. The recognition that some connections transcended practical calculation or professional necessity. I love you, Minjun said with quiet certainty that made the words feel inevitable rather than surprising. I love your strength and your courage and the way you challenge me when I am wrong. I love that you saved my life and then stayed to help me build something better than what I had before. I love that you see darkness in me and choose to stay anyway because you understand that some darkness exists to protect the light. Maya felt tears she had not shed since childhood burning behind her eyes as the full weight of his declaration settled over her. This was not the desperate passion of crisis or the convenient attraction of forced proximity. This was conscious choice made with full knowledge of costs and complications and the certainty that some risks were worth taking. I love you too, she said, the words feeling both foreign and familiar on her lips. I love that you respect my strength instead of trying to diminish it. I love that you trust me with responsibilities that matter. I love that you show me gentleness while showing the world exactly how dangerous you can be when someone threatens what you protect. She leaned forward until their foreheads touched, their breathing synchronized in the quiet space between declarations and promises. I love that you make me feel like I've found my place in a world that never seemed to have room for who I actually am. Minjun kissed her then with the reverence of someone handling something precious and irreplaceable, his lips moving against hers with tenderness that belied the power she knew those hands possessed. Maya kissed him back with equal care and desperate relief, finally allowing herself to acknowledge what she had been fighting since the night she chose to save his life. When they broke apart, Minjun reached into his jacket with movements that carried ceremonial weight. The ring he withdrew was not ostentatious or flashy, but elegant in its simplicity, platinum set with a diamond that caught hospital lighting and threw it back in prismatic celebration. Maya-chun, he said with formal gravity that somehow made the moment more rather than less romantic. Will you marry me, not because circumstances force us together, but because we choose each other freely, with full knowledge of what that choice means? Maya looked at the ring, then at his face, then at her grandmother, sleeping peacefully in a bed she could afford because the man offering her his future had already proven what love looked like when backed by unlimited resources and unwavering determination. Yes, she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was accepting. Yes, I will marry you and build something beautiful from all this danger and complexity and unexpected love. Minjun slipped the ring onto her finger with reverent precision, sealing promises that transformed employee into partner, attraction into commitment, tactical alliance into something far more dangerous and infinitely more valuable. Maya admired the ring for a moment before looking up at the man who would share her life and all its complications. Mrs. Park is going to be insufferable about this, she said with amusement that carried joy she had not felt in years. Minjun's laughter transformed his austere features into something beautiful and unguarded. She has already begun planning a wedding that incorporates traditions from both our cultures, plus several she appears to have invented specifically for the occasion. Maya could picture it clearly. Korean ceremonies blended with African American traditions, creating something new and perfect that honored both their histories while building toward a future neither could have imagined alone. Outside the hospital windows, the city spread before them like a promise wrapped in challenge. Beautiful and dangerous and utterly theirs to claim together. I hope this story moved you as much as it moved me to tell it. Love often comes when we least expect it and in forms we never imagined. But when it arrives with someone who sees us completely and chooses us anyway, magic becomes possible. Have you ever had a moment where everything changed because someone saw your true strength and valued it rather than fearing it? I would love to hear your thoughts about love that transforms us while letting us remain exactly who we are meant to be.